the 11th of June, 2025, room 2141 of the Rayburn House Office Building. The House Judiciary Committee officially convenes. The scheduled proceeding is a hearing on constitutional standards for government records and public accountability. The terminology resembles a graduate-level legal syllabus. Speaker Mike Johnson occupies the center position on the dais. The structural hierarchy of the House of Representatives dictates that speakers do not traditionally chair standard committee hearings. The configuration is an operational anomaly. However, the designated subject matter is constitutional law. Constitutional law is the specific discipline Johnson practiced for 2 consecutive decades in Louisiana prior to his federal election. The committee authorized this seating arrangement by unanimous consent. Hillary Rodham Clinton sits at the witness table. The physical environment is identical to her previous congressional appearances, but the procedural dynamics have altered. She is attired in a charcoal suit. In the visual vocabulary of congressional testimonies, navy and black project rigid authority, while lighter palettes project accessibility. Charcoal represents a calculated median. A single pearl pin secures her collar. Her reading glasses are placed flat on the wooden surface of the table. They are not utilized for reading. They remain staged as a visual instrument of readiness. Speaker Johnson operates with minimal equipment. A single yellow-lined legal pad rests on his desk. The retail value of the item is approximately $3.49 per 3-pack at standard commercial suppliers. It is the functional tool of a working attorney in Shreveport, Louisiana, where aesthetic expenditures on stationery are generally considered inefficient. Clinton evaluates the chairman. Her methodology is identical to her approach in every preceding hearing over 30 years. She visually calculates the professional distance between herself and the presiding officer. She processes the known variables. Johnson is the least experienced speaker in over a century. He was a 4th ballot consensus selection. He possesses no federal clerkships, no Ivy League affiliations, and no appellate history before the Supreme Court. She categorizes the threat level as negligible. She leans toward the microphone. Mr. Speaker, she begins, with all due respect, and I mean that sincerely, you are the least experienced speaker in 140 years. Her vocal delivery is engineered to project the institutional weight of decades spent in executive environments. You have been in Congress for fewer years than I spent as Secretary of State alone. You practice law in Shreveport. I practice law at the Yale Law Clinic, at the Children's Defense Fund, at the Rose Law Firm, and in the White House counsel's orbit. She inserts a deliberate pause into the audio record. The duration is calibrated to maximize the impact of the subsequent sentence. Before you lecture me on constitutional standards, perhaps consider that some of us have been applying them at the highest levels of government while you were filing briefs in Beausier Parish. She concludes the statement by summarizing his political ascension. Your primary qualification for the speakership was not competence. It was that nobody else wanted the job. You were the 4th choice, Mr. Speaker, the participation trophy speaker. The acoustic environment of room 2141 shifts. 200 individuals simultaneously process the directness of the hierarchy being established. Yale preceding Louisiana State University, the State Department preceding Beausier Parish, decades of executive experience preceding a brief congressional tenure. Behind the witness, a staff aide begins typing rapidly on a digital tablet. On the dais, Speaker Johnson does not issue a verbal reprimand. He does not strike the gavel. He removes the cap from his pen. He writes exactly 2 words on the yellow legal pad. He looks up at the witness table. A structural legal error has just been entered into the congressional record. By proactively listing her elite credentials, the Yale Law degree, the Rose Law Firm partnership, the cabinet-level executive experience, the witness has voluntarily established herself as a premier legal authority. In the mechanics of constitutional law, a documented expert cannot claim procedural ignorance. By asserting that she is the most legally educated individual in the room, she has eliminated her own capacity to evade complex legal questions. She has walked into the examination room and announced her superiority, effectively demanding the test. Madam Secretary Johnson states, His voice maintains a flat instructional frequency. It is the specific cadence of an educator who has managed classrooms for 20 years. Thank you for the resume. It is impressive. Yale Law, 1973. Rose Law Firm, Children's Defense Fund, Secretary of State. I wrote it all down. He elevates the yellow legal pad. The broadcast cameras focus on the two words written in block capitals. They read, Pop Quiz. Since you have reminded me of your qualifications, Madam Secretary, I would like to test them, he says, placing the pad back on the wooden surface. 5 questions. Constitutional law, the exact kind I used to administer to first-year students at Liberty University. He locks his visual focus onto Clinton. I am confident a Yale Law graduate will find them straightforward, he states. He pauses for a single second to establish the operational transition. Let me walk you through the first question. Speaker Johnson's voice settles into a distinct, measured rhythm. It is the operational tempo of an instructor who has delivered a specific lecture multiple times and anticipates precisely where the audience will fall silent. Title 18, United States Code, Section 2071, Johnson states, the Federal Records Act. Madam Secretary, you studied this at Yale, you applied it at the State Department. So here is my question. It is the exact kind I utilized for first-year students who had not completed the assigned reading, except I know you have done the reading because you lived it. He observes her. The visual assessment is devoid of aggression. It is entirely analytical. Under 18 U.S.C. Section 2071, what is the statutory penalty for the willful concealment, removal, or destruction of federal records? The ambient noise in the hearing room drops. It is not a dramatic cessation of sound. It is a procedural quiet. The room collectively registers that the question posed by the chairman is not rhetorical. He requires a verbal response. He waits for the answer. He waits with the practiced patience of an academic professional who understands that silence functions as an instructional tool. Clinton's eyes track downward. Her line of sight does not shift to her left, where her prepared briefing materials are located. Her visual focus locks onto the surface of the witness table, specifically onto her own hands resting flat against the oak. Her lips press together. The facial movement is not a political smile. A political smile is a strategic asset deployed to project confidence. This expression serves a structural purpose. Her lips form a tight physical seal designed exclusively to prevent any verbal emission from escaping the oral cavity. She possesses the correct legal answer. Every individual in the room holding a Juris Doctor degree knows she possesses the answer. The statutory penalty is up to 3 years of federal imprisonment. More critically, the statute mandates disqualification from holding any public office under the United States government. Vocalizing the correct answer requires her to recite her own potential criminal sentence and political termination into a live microphone broadcasting on the C-SPAN network. She selects silence. 3 seconds pass. 4, 5. Johnson nods. The physical movement is brief. It acknowledges the blank answer. I will answer it for you, Madam Secretary. His voice remains steady, modulating to a lower instructional frequency. The penalty is up to 3 years imprisonment and disqualification from holding any office under the United States. He allows the statutory parameters to echo within the chamber. You knew that. You knew it when you established a private email server in the basement of your primary residence in Chappaqua. You knew it when your technical team utilized BleachBit, a military-grade data destruction software protocol, to permanently wipe 33,000 emails. And you knew it when a reporter asked you about wiping the server, and you responded on camera to the American public, what, like with a cloth? He places his pen flat on the yellow pad. Senator Kennedy previously questioned you regarding that quote in this exact building. He utilized humor. It was an effective line of questioning. I'm not going to utilize humor today, Madam Secretary, because the action was not humorous. It was a Yale Law graduate intentionally pretending not to understand a federal statute she memorized during her first academic semester. That was not technical confusion. That was a calculated performance. The audience for that performance was the American electorate. They deserved an objective standard of compliance from an individual who swore an oath to serve them. Speaker Johnson places his pen flat against the yellow pad. The proceeding transitions from statutory application to physical record. He alters his posture. He leans backward against the leather chair. The adjustment signals a shift in operational mode. He is no longer speaking as a constitutional instructor. He is speaking as a direct witness. My father served as a firefighter in Shreveport, Louisiana, Johnson states. Engine Company 10. On November 3, 1984, he responded to a structure fire on Linwood Avenue, a commercial warehouse. The building was fully involved upon his arrival. Flames had breached the roof structure. His colleague, an individual named Russell, was trapped inside the perimeter. Johnson maintains a flat vocal frequency. The delivery mechanism has been purged of emotional variance through 3 decades of repetition. It leaves only the raw data. The structure collapsed. Russell expired inside. My father sustained thermal burns across 40% of his body surface area. He required an 8-month hospitalization. Surgeons performed 17 distinct skin graft procedures. 17 times, medical personnel removed epidermal tissue from one sector of his body to surgically attach it to another. He was 32 years old. My mother was 29. I was 12. He continues detailing the timeline without altering his volume. He never resumed active duty. He attempted a desk assignment, but the structural grafts on his lumbar region could not sustain the physical pressure of sitting in a standard chair for more than 60 minutes. He founded a nonprofit burn foundation to instruct other personnel on survival parameters. He administered this foundation from his living room, utilizing a specific chair equipped with supplementary foam padding. He occupied that specific chair for the remainder of his life. The audio array picks up the precise articulation of the next data point. At 12 years old, I learned to calibrate physical contact. I learned not to embrace my father with standard pressure because applying pressure to grafted skin does not provide comfort. It inflicts a wound. Most children learn to hug gently following verbal instruction. I learned this operational parameter by observing my father flinch. He directs his vision across the 8-foot distance to the witness table. My father swore an oath. The parameters differ. Firefighters swear to protect lives and property, not the Constitution. But the functional mechanism is identical. An oath is a binding contract. You do not select which clauses apply to you. You do not choose which operational hazards you will engage. You do not construct a backdoor before entering through the front. He pauses, letting the silence isolate the next sentence. My father entered through the front door on Linwood Avenue because his oath required it. He did not evaluate the political convenience of the structure. The front door cost him his physical body. Johnson's voice achieves absolute acoustic clarity. You executed an oath as well, Madam Secretary. You raised your right hand and swore to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. Following that execution, you constructed a back door. You engineered a private server and a shadow communications network designed to process public operations outside the perimeter of public visibility. My father honored his contract, and it cost him everything. You breached yours, and it cost you nothing. At the witness table, the physical reaction is instantaneous and measurable. Clinton's cranium has been executing a continuous minor nodding motion, the standard programmed reflex of a public figure listening to a first responder narrative. The motion terminates mid-cycle. It does not stop violently. It simply freezes. Her head locks at a 2-degree forward tilt. The position represents a mechanical failure between 2 conflicting protocols. Continuing to nod indicates visual agreement with the assertion of a breached oath. Ceasing the nod entirely and returning to a neutral posture indicates an active, visible rejection of a burn victim's comparison. She remains immobilized in the median space, caught between courtesy and confession. Her left hand elevates from the oak table. The fingers move upward and make contact with the pearl pin secured at her collar. She does not adjust the hardware. She merely applies tactile pressure to the object. In behavioral analysis, this specific sequence is categorized as a self-soothing reflex deployed automatically when primary defensive structures are severely compromised. Broadcast camera 2 isolates the motion in a tight frame. The lens captures the hand of one of the most powerful political figures in American history, anchoring itself to a piece of jewelry. Speaker Johnson does not alter his physical posture. He retrieves his pen from the surface of the yellow pad. The committee room has acclimated to his operational rhythm. Let me walk you through the next question, Johnson states. It is the designated transition phrase signaling the opening of a new constitutional parameter. Title V, United States Code, Section 552, the Freedom of Information Act, commonly designated as FOIA, signed into federal law by Lyndon Johnson in 1966. He adds a brief addendum, no relation. The delivery is entirely devoid of comedic inflection. The Freedom of Information Act exists to enforce a fundamental mechanical principle of the American Republic. The government is the property of the governed, not the reverse. The citizens possess a statutory right to review the operational data generated in their name. He focuses directly on the witness. When you engineered you unilaterally decided that the public's right to access operational data extended only to the exact perimeter you personally authorized. That is not an administrative management failure, Madam Secretary. That is a constitutional breach. It is the functional difference between a public servant and a sovereign entity, and the Constitution provides zero margin for interpretation regarding which one you were appointed to be. Johnson turns a page on the legal pad. The friction of the paper is audible. Let us examine a specific documented application of this architecture, he begins. Following the 2010 seismic event in Haiti, the international community pledged $4.4 billion to rebuild the national infrastructure. The Clinton Foundation assumed a central logistical role in distributing that foreign aid. He defines the operational matrix. You occupied the office of Secretary of State, functioning as the primary federal authority approving international aid disbursements. Your husband occupied the role of United Nations Special Envoy to Haiti, functioning as the primary authority coordinating the international reconstruction efforts. Simultaneously, the Clinton Foundation received direct financial donations from private contractors actively seeking those exact reconstruction contracts. 3 distinct operational roles. One family unit, $4.4 billion. He pauses. He allows the monetary figure to stabilize in the acoustic space. The verifiable physical output of that $4.4 billion was 6 permanent residential structures, 6 homes. He looks down at the pad, then back up. When Haitian citizens and investigative personnel filed formal FOIA requests to map the decision-making matrix to understand how the contracts were awarded, and why an influx of $4.4 billion yielded only 6 permanent homes and a luxury hotel, those legal requests hit a systemic void. The electronic communications detailing those financial decisions were not housed within the secure digital archives of the State Department. They were located on a server tower in the basement of your primary residence in Chappaqua, New York, operating in a physical space situated between a residential water heater and seasonal holiday decorations. He ensures the physical reality of the setup is fully registered by the committee. The citizens of a nation that suffered 316,000 casualties could not access their own reconstruction records because those records were classified as your private correspondence. They were housed in a closed system specifically engineered to be unreachable by the federal transparency laws that guaranteed the public's right to reach them. A working attorney in Shreveport would classify that as the deliberate obstruction of a democratic process. What terminology does a Yale Law graduate apply to it, Madam Secretary? At the witness table, Clinton's physical response deviates from her established baseline. She does not merely adjust her posture or lean toward the microphone. She executes a full structural rotation. Her shoulders pivot exactly 15 degrees to her left. Her visual focus locks onto her primary aide, a Georgetown MBA graduate seated directly behind her. Clinton's mouth opens approximately half an inch, signaling the biological initiation of a verbal inquiry. However, The inquiry is never vocalized. Broadcasting a request for strategic assistance into a live microphone during a hostile congressional hearing is a critical vulnerability. The visual exchange between the former Secretary of State and the aide occurs in absolute silence. The aide processes the visual request. Her optical reaction is minute but measurable. Her pupils dilate slightly. She executes a lateral head motion. The negative shake is so physically constrained it registers almost entirely as a theoretical movement. The nonverbal data transmission is instantaneous and definitive. There is no available countermeasure. There is no page within the prepared briefing binder designed to explain why disaster victims could not access their own financial records. There is no pivot. Clinton terminates the silent exchange. She rotates her shoulders back toward the chairman's dais. The temporal mechanics of the movement are highly specific. The initial rotation away from the microphone, the motion of an individual actively seeking a lifeline, required exactly 1 second. It was fast and kinetic. The rotation back toward the microphone, the motion of an individual returning empty-handed to face a systemic failure, requires exactly 3 seconds. It is slow and weighted. The 2-second discrepancy between the outward rotation and the inward return provides the exact visual measurement of systemic disappointment. The hearing room observes the temporal discrepancy. The hearing room logs the data. Let me walk you through the law on classified information, Speaker Johnson states. He retrieves his pen. He draws a solid horizontal line across the yellow legal pad, bisecting the page into 2 distinct sections. He writes 2 words on the left side and 2 words on the right side. He elevates the pad, orienting the surface toward the broadcast cameras. The text on the left reads, "Extremely careless." The text on the right reads, "Grossly negligent." Title 18, United States Code, Section 793F, prohibits gross negligence in the handling of national defense information, he states. He begins systematically listing the physical data. 110 emails on your unsecured server contain classified information. 8 email chains were classified at the top secret SAP level. He defines the acronym for the congressional record. Special Access Programs, the highest classification tier in the United States government. Information possessing a sensitivity level where even the operational code names remain classified. Information that career intelligence officers are required to access exclusively inside SCIFs, specially constructed rooms where communication devices are confiscated, exterior windows do not exist, and the architectural walls are engineered to defeat electromagnetic surveillance. He pauses to establish the operational contrast. You access that identical information on a server that shared a basement with your residential water heater. He defines the administrative control parameters. A server administered not by the National Security Agency, not by a federal security team, but by a private IT contractor operating out of Colorado who possessed no security clearance at the time of his initial configuration work on the system. Johnson taps the left side of the divided page with his index finger. FBI Director James Comey, who issued the recommendation against prosecution, categorized your conduct as extremely careless. He shifts his finger and taps the right side of the page. Grossly negligent is the specific statutory language that triggers criminal liability. He holds the pad suspended between the 2 written phrases. In 20 years of practicing constitutional law, Madam Secretary, I have learned that the distance between extremely careless and grossly negligent is the exact distance between a parking ticket and a felony. He lowers the pad. The words sound similar. The legal consequences are not. One yields a financial fine. The other yields a prison cell. And in this specific case, the FBI director evaluated the physical evidence, 110 classified emails, 8 top secret chains, the deployment of BleachBit, a private server in a residential basement, and decided it was a parking ticket. He looks directly at the witness. You drove home. A sudden acoustic event emanates from the witness table. It is short, involuntary, and expelled forcefully through the nasal cavity. It is a laugh. It is not a calibrated political smile. It is not the practiced, modulated chuckle utilized during standard fundraising dinners. It is a genuine, reflexive, acoustic reaction from a trained attorney who has just processed a legal argument constructed so cleanly that her internal craftsman cannot help but acknowledge its structural perfection, even as that argument is actively utilized to dismantle her defense. The parking ticket versus felony construction is legally impeccable. Her academic training at Stanford and Yale Law compels her to recognize superior legal composition involuntarily and professionally, regardless of whether the composition is deployed for or against her. The acoustic event terminates instantaneously. Her optical sensors register the illuminated red recording indicator on broadcast camera 1. She comprehends within a fraction of a second that she has just laughed audibly while discussing classified intelligence breaches on a national television broadcast. Her facial architecture closes. The physical transformation does not occur gradually. It drops instantaneously, mirroring mechanical shutters slamming over a window. The transition from a genuine human reaction back to a neutral political mask requires less than 1 full second. The speed is so rapid it visually registers as mechanical, a completely inhuman transition resembling a light switch being cut off. The exact temporal measurement of this transition is 0.8 seconds. Behind her, the primary aide slides a single sheet of paper across the oak table. Clinton shifts her eyeline downward, processes the printed text, and does not execute the recommendation. The text reads, "Invoke executive privilege." Executive privilege is a legal immunity parameter that does not apply to a private citizen providing testimony before a congressional oversight committee. Both the witness and the aide possess this foundational legal knowledge. The sliding of the paper is merely the physical action of an operative who has exhausted all viable countermeasures, but is required by protocol to project operational activity. Johnson continues. His vocal parameters remain entirely unchanged. He does not react to the laugh. He does not pause to exploit the visual transition. He proceeds directly into the next operational data point, maintaining the steady momentum of an instructor navigating through an interruption. Additionally, Senator Grassley has discovered that the FBI never completed its evidentiary review of all digital thumb drives containing copies of your emails. He logs the temporal anomaly. In the year 2025, federal devices exist that have never been opened. A constitutional lawyer in Shreveport would classify that as an incomplete investigation. A first-year law student would classify it as obstruction by delay. I will let the American people decide what to call it. Last question, Madam Secretary. Speaker Johnson states he turns to a fresh page on the yellow legal pad. The preceding pages remain visible beneath his hand, forming a physical ledger of the 4 prior constitutional inquiries. Article 1, Sections 2 and 3 of the United States Constitution grant Congress the power of oversight regarding the executive branch, Johnson states. He defines the operational parameters. That power includes the specific statutory authority to issue subpoenas and preservation orders for government records. The structural premise is foundational. Executive power operating without congressional oversight constitutes tyranny. He shifts his visual focus back to the witness. Let me walk you through a timeline. This specific deployment of the transition phrase carries a different mechanical weight. It does not precede a legal statute. It precedes sequential data. March 4, 2015, Johnson begins. The House Select Committee on Benghazi issued a formal subpoena for your electronic communications. Simultaneously, a preservation order was issued, legally requiring that all relevant records be maintained and protected intact. He pauses. He writes March 4 on the legal pad. March 25th through March 31st, 2015, your technical team utilized BleachBit software to permanently destroy emails housed on the private server. He writes March 25 to 31 on the pad. He physically draws a directional arrow between the 2 documented dates. 21 days between the federal order to preserve and the internal directive to destroy. Exactly 3 weeks. Johnson looks past the witness table, directing his eye line toward the primary broadcast cameras. The subsequent data is engineered for the public record. In constitutional law, a specific terminology exists for destroying evidence after a preservation order has been issued. The classification is spoliation. I am going to define this operational mechanic. He elevates the legal pad, displaying the handwritten dates and the connecting arrow to the room. Spoliation triggers a legal mechanism classified as an adverse inference. When an individual destroys evidence after receiving a federal directive to preserve it, the legal system presumes it does not suspect. It presumes that the destroyed material was inherently harmful to the individual who destroyed it. The operational burden of proof completely reverses. The investigating body is no longer required to prove the evidence was damaging. The individual who destroyed the evidence is required to prove it was not. He lowers the pad to the desk. 33,000 emails deleted 3 weeks after Congress ordered them preserved. In any standard courtroom within the United States, that sequence is classified as spoliation. The legal system automatically assumes the worst possible scenario regarding the destroyed data, that is, black-letter law, the exact kind instructed at Yale. At the witness table, Clinton's right hand initiates movement. The hand, which had remained entirely stationary for 25 consecutive minutes, slides across the oak surface. It tracks a direct trajectory toward the condensation-covered water glass positioned to her right. The physical movement is a recognized metric. During a previous high-profile hearing, Clinton utilized the exact motion of reaching for and drinking from a water glass as a mechanical delay tactic. It artificially extended her response time while projecting calm hydration. The hand approaches the glass. It decelerates. It comes to a complete physical halt exactly 2 inches from the outer surface of the cylinder. The hand hovers in the empty space. Reaching the glass and executing the drinking motion would publicly replicate an exposed evasion pattern in front of a national television audience. The witness processes this tactical variable mid-reach. The hand remains suspended for exactly 2 seconds. It is locked in a state of physical suspension between the biological impulse to execute a delay tactic and the strategic calculation that the tactic is compromised. She lowers her hand. She places it flat against the table, directly beside the glass, deliberately avoiding physical contact with the object. It is the physical settlement of an individual who has evaluated the available operational maneuvers and determined that absolute stillness is the least damaging option. Speaker Johnson stands up. He does not execute the motion dramatically. It is the standard physical reset of an instructor who has concluded the presentation of new material. Madam Secretary, I have asked you 5 questions today, Johnson states. He counts them on his fingers to provide visual confirmation, records law, oath of office, FOIA, classified information handling, congressional oversight. 5 articles of a Constitution that the individual at the witness table swore to defend. He drops his hand. In 20 years of teaching constitutional law, I graded thousands of examinations. I instructed my students on the first day of every semester with a single absolute rule. The final grade does not measure what you know. It measures what you do with what you know. The single strike of the gavel terminates the physical proceeding in room 2141. Simultaneously, the digital extraction protocol initiates across every major media control room. The initial data packet that dominates the social media algorithms does not focus on the complex spoliation timeline or the federal record statutes. It focuses on a specific, accessible legal analogy. Within 48 hours, the phrase parking ticket or felony entirely replaces the established political term two-tiered justice within the national vocabulary. The substitution occurs rapidly because the new terminology is highly specific, instantly visual, and originates from a practicing constitutional attorney rather than a television commentator. The phrase is immediately weaponized as a standard diagnostic tool. When a federal senator falls under investigation for insider trading, the digital public asks, is this a parking ticket or a felony? When a state governor is accused of misusing campaign funds, or a federal judge fails to disclose financial gifts, the identical metric is applied. Simultaneously, a distinct demographic processes the hearing data through a different lens. First responder, communities across the country, individuals bound by functional oaths identify directly with the narrative regarding Shreveport Fire Department Engine Company. 10. The rhetorical contrast is extracted and physically manufactured. The text, some run in, some build back doors, appears on vehicular bumper stickers nationwide. It is printed on apparel sold at local fire department fundraisers and is prominently displayed on a primary banner at the International Association of Firefighters National Convention. The son of a burn victim has spoken for every first responder's family, and the transmission is received with absolute clarity. However, the primary viral event, the specific data file that structurally alters the public perception of the witness, is entirely nonverbal. It is the 0.8 seconds. Digital technicians isolate the precise duration it took for Clinton's facial architecture to travel from a genuine, involuntary laugh back to a rigid political mask. Someone always logs the timestamp. 0.8 seconds becomes a standardized unit of measurement. Online platforms utilize it as the definitive mathematical answer to a new cultural query. How many seconds does it take the former Secretary of State to stop being human? The isolated video file is broadcast in slow motion across every digital platform. It accumulates 34 million views within a 3-day window. The algorithmic velocity is not driven by partisan malice. It is driven by the irrefutable visual confirmation of an established theory. The mask is documented as a physical reality. An independent content creator, a pianist, synchronizes the video file to an audio track. The creator strikes and sustains a single piano key during the exact duration of the laugh, terminating the note with absolute precision, the millisecond the facial mask descends. That specific multimedia iteration generates 11 million views on the TikTok platform alone. It initiates a 3-week behavioral trend where millions of users film themselves executing genuine laughter before snapping into emotionless, professional expressions. Every replication of the trend serves as a digital reminder of the exact distance between the individual the witness actually is and the individual she performed. The phenomenon crosses from digital entertainment into formal academic verification. A tenured psychology professor at Stanford University, the undergraduate alma mater of the witness, publishes a comprehensive public analysis of the 0.8-second transition. The professor categorizes the event as a textbook clinical example of effective override. The term is defined as the precise biological moment when genuine human emotion is manually suppressed by strategic self-monitoring protocols. The academic thread is extracted and cited as primary source material in 14 separate national news publications. The professor's published conclusion requires no political context to deliver its impact. The analysis states, the speed of the transition under 1 second suggests a lifetime of practice. This is not a person who sometimes wears a mask. This is a person who lives in one. A federal judge presiding in the District of Columbia executes a signature on a specific legal injunction. The document implements a formal adverse inference order against a former cabinet-level official. It is the first recorded instance of this specific judicial action in American history. The mechanical meaning of this signature is absolute. Every deleted digital file previously housed on the Chappaqua server is now legally presumed to contain information inherently harmful to the defense. The burden of proof has inverted. 30 years of the established defensive strategy, the reliance on the premise that investigators cannot prove the contents of deleted emails is structurally terminated. The new legal parameter requires the defense to mathematically prove the deleted materials were innocent. They cannot execute this requirement because the materials no longer exist. The deletion is the justification for the inference. The inference is the direct consequence of the deletion. It is a closed legal loop offering 0 exit vectors. Simultaneously, the federal court issues a 30-day compliance mandate regarding the unexamined digital thumb drives located by Senator Grassley. The Federal Bureau of Investigation complies with the directive. The forensic analysis reveals 3 individual drives containing email chains classified at the top secret SAP level. These specific data chains have never been processed by any prior investigative body. The Department of Justice issues a public statement regarding the discovery. The statement consists of exactly 2 sentences and 14 words. The materials are relevant to ongoing investigations. No further comment at this time. In the operational vocabulary of Washington legal defense, those 14 words represent a critical systemic threat. The bureaucratic machinery activates across multiple agencies. The Department of Justice expands the Haiti reconstruction audit to maximum operational scope. The investigation parameters encompass every issued contract, every friend of bill logistical designation, and the $4.4 billion financial delta that yielded only 6 permanent residential structures. Concurrently, the Clinton Foundation receives a formal notification via certified federal mail. It is an Internal Revenue Service audit. It is the first federal-level audit initiated against the entity since 2018. The operational scope includes all Haiti-related disbursements and all digital communications transmitted between the Foundation and the State Department during the tenure of the Secretary. Those specific communications were housed on the private server. They were subjected to the BleachBit protocol. They are now actively subject to the adverse inference order. The institutional severance occurs rapidly. Georgetown University terminates the scheduled 2026 commencement keynote address. The university administration does not initiate the cancellation autonomously. It is compelled by a formal petition containing 1,200 verified signatures from active law students. The petition explicitly cites the legal concepts of spoliation and adverse inference, utilizing the exact statutory language instructed by Speaker Johnson during the hearing. The law students deploy a constitutional law lesson to remove the witness from their campus. The commercial infrastructure collapses. The Clinton Global Initiative event calendar for the 2026 fiscal year is updated on their primary server. The status of upcoming events is not listed as postponed. The calendar is entirely empty. No corporate sponsors remain active. Simon & Schuster executes the moral turpitude clause embedded within a $3 million literary advance contract. The publication agreement is voided. It marks the first recorded instance in modern publishing history where a major commercial house terminates an agreement with a former major party presidential nominee. The Literary Representation Agency categorizes the contract termination as unprecedented. The Speaker's Congressional Press Office categorizes the termination as the final grade. Speaking fees, which had steadily declined from $250,000 following previous congressional inquiries, reach a new operational status. They are not merely reduced, they are non-existent. No organizations submit offers. The market does not shrink. The market disappears. The final recorded speaking engagement on the public calendar is retroactively removed from the host organization's website archive. Yale Law School, the institution that issued the witness's Juris Doctor degree in 1973, formally integrates the hearing transcript into its professional responsibility seminar curriculum. The presiding professor provides an official statement to the Yale Daily News. The statement reads, "The hearing is a masterclass in what happens when knowledge is separated from integrity. We use it to teach our students that knowing the law and following the law are 2 fundamentally different operational modes." The individual who studied constitutional law within that specific architectural building is now utilized as the primary academic example of what occurs when a practitioner determines that constitutional law does not apply to them. A second-year law student publishes a digital update following the seminar. The professor never used the word guilty. She did not need to. The Constitution said it for her. The rhetorical comparison between Shreveport and Yale becomes the definitive cultural artifact of the proceeding. A commercial billboard is purchased on Interstate 20, positioned directly outside the municipal limits of Shreveport, Louisiana. The funding source is anonymous. The visual design is strictly minimal, white typography over a solid blue background. It displays no corporate logos and no political signatures. It simply displays the text. The distance between Shreveport and Yale is not the distance between lesser and greater. It is the distance between a place where people honor the law because they believe in it and a place where people learn the law so they can get around it. The physical broadcast concludes. The camera feeds inside room 2141 are terminated. The digital transmission ends. However, 3 operational cases remain active in the physical world. 1, the 30-day federal review of the top-secret thumb drives. 2, the Department of Justice audit of the $4.4 billion Haiti Reconstruction Fund. 3, the active adverse inference order regarding the spoliated communications. All 3 active cases share a single operational vulnerability. They require continuous public observation. The political survival of the witness over 3 decades was not achieved through verifiable innocence. It was achieved through public attrition. It relied entirely on the public looking away when the legal mechanics became complex. The constitutional examination has concluded, the academic grade has been recorded in the public ledger, but the final operational verdict does not reside with the chairman of the Judiciary Committee. It resides with the individuals monitoring the data. The clock on the federal review is actively ticking. If the public observation stops, the clock stops. The facility is designated as a Sensitive Compartmented Information Facility, or SCIF, located within the J. Edgar Hoover Building. The environment is defined by absolute acoustic and electromagnetic isolation. There are no exterior windows. The air filtration system generates a constant low-frequency hum. 2 individuals occupy the room, a lead investigator and a digital forensic specialist. They operate a workstation that is air-gapped, physically disconnected from any external network or internet architecture. The digital forensic specialist retrieves the 3 encrypted thumb drives provided by the Office of Senator Grassley. They are placed on a sterilized surface. The specialist inserts the first drive into the workstation's isolated port. The decryption protocol initiates. The authentication sequence requires 60 seconds. The monitor displays the file directory. The specialist executes the command to open the primary folder. The screen is immediately bisected by a horizontal banner. The color is vivid red. The text is printed in white, block capitals, top secret, SAP, Orkin. The SAP designation indicates Special Access Programs compartmentalized intelligence operations where access is restricted to a specific list of named individuals. The ORCON designation signifies originator-controlled, meaning the data cannot be disseminated without the explicit authorization of the initial intelligence agency. The lead investigator observes the screen. He does not issue a verbal statement. He looks at the secondary and tertiary files. They contain identical headers. The documents are not administrative summaries. They are raw intelligence reports. The metadata records the date of transmission. The dates align with the tenure of the Secretary of State. The storage location in the metadata is identified as a residential server in Chappaqua. The digital forensic specialist stops the scroll. He locks his visual focus on a specific file regarding special access protocols in the Middle East. The room remains silent. The only audible sound is the mechanical rotation of the workstation's internal cooling fans. The high agents exchange a single visual confirmation. The parking ticket analogy established in room 2141 has just been superseded by the physical reality of the terminal display. The specialist initiates the full forensic imaging protocol. The progress bar begins its transit across the screen. The clock on the 30-day federal mandate is actively counting.